In the early 21st century, reports began emerging from a small rural community describing an unusual medical phenomenon in which residents were suddenly falling into prolonged states of sleep, lasting days, weeks, and in some cases far longer than medically expected. At first, these cases were treated as isolated incidents, attributed to exhaustion, illness, or individual health conditions, rather than a shared or environmental cause affecting multiple people within the same location. As the number of affected residents increased, local healthcare providers realized that the pattern was abnormal, as individuals of different ages, professions, and health backgrounds were experiencing similar episodes without clear warning signs. Those affected would often fall asleep abruptly during normal daily activities, including work, conversation, or meals, and could not be easily awakened using conventional medical methods. When patients eventually regained consciousness, many reported confusion, memory gaps, headaches, and an altered perception of time, as if they had slept only briefly, despite having been unconscious for extended periods. The phenomenon quickly disrupted daily life within the village, as schools, workplaces, and essential services were affected by the unpredictable loss of conscious residents. Families were forced to care for loved ones who appeared physically stable but remained unresponsive, creating emotional strain and uncertainty about potential long-term effects. Medical examinations revealed that vital signs in sleeping individuals remained largely normal, with stable heart rates, breathing patterns, and brain activity inconsistent with coma or typical sleep disorders. This contradiction puzzled doctors, as patients did not fit diagnostic criteria for known neurological conditions such as narcolepsy, encephalitis, or prolonged coma states. As local resources became overwhelmed, regional and national health authorities were notified, prompting broader investigation into the cause of the unexplained sleep episodes. Specialists from neurology, toxicology, infectious disease, and environmental health were brought in to assess patients and evaluate possible external factors. Initial hypotheses focused on infectious agents, including viral or bacterial causes that might affect brain function, yet laboratory tests repeatedly failed to identify a consistent pathogen. Toxic exposure was also considered, as environmental contaminants can sometimes induce neurological symptoms affecting consciousness and sleep regulation. Investigators examined water sources, air quality, food supplies, and household materials for traces of chemicals or pollutants that could explain the symptoms. Despite extensive testing, no single toxic substance was identified at levels sufficient to account for the widespread and recurring nature of the condition. The absence of a clear medical explanation intensified concern among residents, many of whom feared the phenomenon could spread further or worsen over time. Media coverage brought national and international attention to the village, framing the situation as a medical mystery rather than a localized health issue. This attention increased pressure on authorities to provide answers, even as evidence remained inconclusive and theories continued to evolve. Doctors noted that the episodes appeared cyclical for some individuals, with residents falling asleep multiple times over weeks or months. The unpredictable recurrence complicated treatment, as patients could not be reliably monitored or protected from entering sleep during potentially dangerous situations. Some residents attempted to leave the village temporarily, only to experience similar symptoms upon returning, suggesting a possible location-based trigger. This observation reinforced suspicions that environmental factors played a role, even though direct evidence remained elusive. Investigators began mapping cases geographically, searching for patterns related to housing, proximity to industrial sites, or geological features. Early mapping suggested clusters, but these patterns shifted over time, undermining attempts to isolate a single source. The phenomenon challenged conventional medical frameworks, as it did not behave like a typical outbreak, poisoning event, or genetic condition. As weeks turned into months, frustration grew among both residents and researchers, who struggled to reconcile observable symptoms with the lack of measurable cause. Authorities implemented precautionary measures, including temporary relocation and increased medical monitoring, though these actions offered limited relief. Children were particularly affected, raising concerns about developmental consequences and long-term neurological impact. Parents reported changes in behavior and cognitive function following repeated sleep episodes, though these effects varied widely. Medical teams conducted imaging studies, including brain scans, which failed to reveal structural abnormalities explaining the condition. This absence of visible damage further deepened the mystery, as symptoms suggested functional disruption rather than physical injury. Researchers began considering less conventional explanations, including interactions between environmental stressors and human physiology. Even so, each proposed explanation accounted for only part of the observed phenomenon. The lack of a unifying theory made it difficult to communicate clear guidance to the affected community. Residents lived with constant uncertainty, unsure when the next episode might occur or how long it would last. Daily routines were disrupted as people avoided driving, operating machinery, or engaging in activities that required sustained alertness. The village gradually became defined by the phenomenon, attracting researchers while burdening residents with unwanted attention. Despite intense scrutiny, no definitive cause was identified during the early stages of investigation. The mystery persisted not because of inaction, but because available evidence refused to converge on a single explanation. Over time, the situation raised broader questions about the limits of medical knowledge in the face of unusual collective symptoms. The phenomenon blurred distinctions between individual illness and environmental influence. It also exposed challenges in diagnosing conditions that lack clear biomarkers or consistent clinical patterns. For the affected community, the experience was both medical and psychological, combining physical symptoms with prolonged uncertainty. The village's identity became inseparable from the unexplained sleep episodes. At this stage, the mystery remained open, defined by unanswered questions rather than confirmed conclusions. As investigations continued, authorities expanded their focus to include geological factors, examining whether naturally occurring substances beneath the village could be influencing air quality or neurological function over prolonged exposure. Researchers studied soil composition and underground formations, noting the presence of minerals that, under certain conditions, could release gases capable of affecting human consciousness or cognitive processes. Attention turned toward abandoned industrial activity in the region, including former mining operations that might have left residual contaminants undetected by initial surface-level testing. Environmental experts considered whether slow, chronic exposure rather than acute poisoning could explain the delayed and recurring onset of symptoms among residents. In parallel, medical researchers revisited neurological explanations, analyzing whether rare sleep disorders could manifest collectively under shared environmental stressors. Some specialists suggested a condition resembling encephalopathy, though typical diagnostic markers remained absent in blood tests and imaging results. The lack of clear physiological damage challenged assumptions that severe symptoms must correspond to visible medical evidence. As theories multiplied, communication between researchers and residents became increasingly complex, with uncertainty undermining public trust. Temporary relocation of affected individuals led to partial improvement in some cases, though symptoms often returned when residents came back to the village. This pattern strengthened arguments for a location-based factor, even as its precise nature remained unidentified. International medical communities began monitoring the case, comparing it with historical incidents involving unexplained mass sleep or lethargy. Similar cases from the past were examined, though differences in scale, duration, and context limited their usefulness as direct comparisons. Over time, investigators acknowledged that the phenomenon did not fit neatly within existing medical categories. This recognition marked a shift from seeking immediate answers toward documenting patterns and mitigating risk. Authorities focused on protecting residents rather than solving the mystery outright, emphasizing monitoring, education, and precaution. Despite these efforts, episodes continued sporadically, reinforcing the sense that the underlying cause had not been addressed. Some residents eventually chose to leave permanently, unwilling to live with ongoing uncertainty and disruption. Others remained, adapting their lives around the possibility of sudden sleep episodes. The long-term psychological impact on the community became evident as stress and anxiety compounded physical symptoms. Researchers debated whether the phenomenon represented a single cause or multiple overlapping factors. This complexity complicated efforts to design targeted interventions or preventive measures. As media attention faded, scientific investigation slowed, leaving many questions unresolved. The case gradually transitioned from active emergency to unresolved medical anomaly. Documentation continued, preserving data for future analysis as methods and understanding evolve. The village's experience entered medical literature as a rare example of unexplained collective sleep disorder. It remains cited as a reminder of how environmental, neurological, and social factors can intersect unpredictably. The phenomenon challenges confidence in medicine's ability to explain all observed symptoms. It also highlights the importance of humility in scientific inquiry when evidence resists interpretation. For those affected, the lack of explanation does not diminish the reality of their experience. The village became known not for its location, but for what happened there. The mystery persists because no single explanation accounts for all observed facts. Each theory resolves some questions while leaving others unanswered. The absence of definitive conclusions has allowed speculation to persist. Yet documented evidence confirms that the events themselves were real. The case continues to be referenced in discussions of unexplained medical phenomena. It stands as an example of how collective experiences can defy conventional diagnosis. The mystery remains open, awaiting future insight or discovery. Time has not erased the unanswered questions, nor has it provided clarity. The village's story remains suspended between observation and explanation. Its legacy is defined by uncertainty rather than resolution. The phenomenon remains unexplained despite sincere investigation. Medical science acknowledges its limits in this case. The silence around the cause continues. The facts are real. The explanation is up to you.